Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I'm looking at making bookings myself.
Phase 3 of BC's restart plan expected next week. Also,
half of our business volume is gone now.
Surviving the losses, BC's tourism-dependent communities hope local visitors will give them a boost. And
the outrage that has been expressed, that's hopeful.
what will it take to dismantle systemic racism?
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. British Columbians could soon be allowed to stay in hotels and even enjoy a movie theater. But that all depends on what our COVID-19 modeling looks like.
Dan Burrow joins us now live with more on this. And Dan, the Premier talked about entering the next phase of our pandemic response today.
Yes, but we are not there yet. John Horgan says Destination BC has fired up a plan to promote tourism within our province, and he says that will roll out once it's safe for them to encourage people to travel again. We know some communities, we're going to hear this tonight, are itching for local visitors to make up for international tourists. Others would prefer that people stay away, at least for now. Moving into phase 3 would include reopening movie theaters, hotels, spas, resorts, overnight camping, travel within BC, as well as film and TV production. Big industries here. But that depends on where our COVID-19 data says we are going.
Next week, Dr. Henry and Minister Dix will be laying out their latest modeling for where we are with respect to the spread of the disease. And I'm hopeful at that time we can move to full implementation of phase 3 of the recovery plan, which would include more travel throughout British Columbia.
Horgan also says allowing non-essential travel throughout BC does include visitors from across Canada, but the U.S.-Canada border is going to remain closed to non-essential travel, at least for now.
Okay, Dan, BC's finance minister also spoke today announcing a plan to help the economy here recover from COVID-19. Tell us the details of that.
$1.5 billion, Anita, set aside for economic stimulus. They'll be hosting some virtual town halls and asking people to fill out an online survey on how they think we ought to spend that money. This pandemic has walloped a huge number of people in BC. The government says we lost almost 400,000 jobs in March and April.
By far, the service sector has suffered the most, accounting for 90% of the job losses. A large percentage of those have been in accommodation, food services, and retail trade. And when you look at those sectors, the lowest wage earners have been the hardest hit.
The Premier says $3.5 billion has already been spent in response to this pandemic, but he says stimulus plans aren't as effective while people are stuck at home, which many have been for most of this pandemic. Anita, Mike?
Dan Burrow live tonight, thanks. Meantime, health officials say they are very concerned about 2 new COVID-19 outbreaks at BC healthcare facilities. People have tested positive at Tabor Home in Abbotsford and at Mission Memorial Hospital, which has reduced services to urgent and emergency care only. Those cases among 19 new cases announced today, pushing the total to nearly 2,800. But there were no new deaths again to report today. That total stays at 168. 11 people are in hospital, 5 in intensive care. Those numbers also steady from yesterday. More than 2,400 people who tested positive have now fully recovered. There are now 185 active cases province-wide.
Well, businesses in tourism-dependent communities like Squamish hope they'll soon get a boost in visitors from other parts of BC.
With no foreign travelers and the U.S. border closed, they're going to need all the help they can get to make it through the summer.
But as Jesse Johnston reports, businesses are scared about what will happen in the fall.
2020 has been rough on everyone, but the Sea to Sky gondola has been hit especially hard.
About half of our business volume is gone now, with the borders closed, and again, the airports and the cruise lines not operating this summer.
Trouble started last year when someone cut the main cable, causing $10 million damage and forcing the gondola to close for 6 months. It reopened in February, only to be shut down again a month later due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It started up again last month, but business is slow.
So long as borders remain closed and travel remains restricted, we're going to need some help.
And it's not just short-term help that tourism-based businesses are looking for.
going in kiteboarding, we'll need some kites.
Business is down by about 50% compared to last year at Daniel Grain's kiteboarding school and store.
And many of us do make the majority of our year's earnings through these busier months, that we are just kind of thinking ahead that, you know, as the season will come to an end in the next coming months here, that we haven't really had the full season to be able to kind of make the money that we need to survive the rest of the year.
That's the big fear right now in tourism-dependent communities like Squamish. Even if British Columbians on staycations help them salvage what's left of the tourist season, what happens after Labor Day?
If we're not opening the province to international visitors, then these guys are going to need a longer runway than just a few months. And I think that's something that I'm really concerned about.
We're all just a bit anxious to see what our government can do to support us, you know, through the balance of 2020 and even into early 2021.
At the gondola, the hope is wage subsidy programs extend into the fall and winter if necessary, something to give them a little certainty in uncertain times. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Squamish.
And we will have a live interview with Destination BC about what a reopened BC might look like. That'll be a little later in this newscast.
And the White Rock Pier has officially reopened today after a nearly 3-month closure because of the pandemic.
As Eva Yugwen-Senge reports tonight, locals are hopeful the reopening means a return to the normalcy for the beach town.
You couldn't miss the excitement in White Rock this morning.
But it's just gorgeous. It makes White Rock what White Rock is, which is gorgeous.
Yeah, whenever we are free, we always come here with the friends, with the family. Yeah, it's so nice to have here, yeah.
Pretty exciting because it's finally opened back up. It's been in like 2 months, I think, right?
His little sister Avery isn't showing it, but her mom says she's just as delighted the pier is open again.
Do you like the pier?
The city says with the province heading towards phase 3 of its restart plan, it was time to let locals and visitors enjoy what White Rock has to offer.
It's just great for the public, our visitors, and our businesses to keep this pier open. And it's the heart of our city.
Restaurants along the waterfront have had a rough go of it since mid-March. Many shut down for several weeks. And with the borders closed, there won't be the usual influx of American tourists.
Everything is a bonus at this point, really. I mean, whether it's the pier being open or the promenade a couple weeks ago or being allowed to do business with dine-in. Right now, we're just looking at what we can do, not what we're not able to do.
And while the city and local businesses are encouraging visitors to come enjoy the area, they're still urging caution.
We do want people to come here, but we want to remember that we've got to do physical distancing. So we've set up picnic tables to enjoy your meals, for takeout, and the restaurants have all done a good job of following the health orders.
A message that locals have taken to heart.
Definitely, like with a stranger, we should maintain distance.
I feel like everybody's doing the right thing down here too, so it's really nice that, you know, everybody's sort of respecting each other's, you know, space.
The city says if crowds on the pier become unmanageable, it will have to close the pier once more. Eva Yugwen-Senge, CBC News, White Rock.
There will be no charges against 3 Vancouver police officers involved in the possible cover-up of information in the case of disgraced VPD Detective Jim Fisher. Alberta's RCMP Major Crime Unit investigated for 3 years, and a special prosecutor has decided not to proceed with charges. The 3 officers will still be subject to conduct investigations under the Police Act. Fisher pleaded guilty to sexual exploitation and breach of trust back in 2018 for kissing 2 young sex trafficking victims. He was sentenced to 20 months in jail. There have been allegations Fisher sexually abused several other young women during the course of his investigations into Vancouver pimps.
Well, protests against racism and police brutality continue weeks after George Floyd's death in Minneapolis.
The calls for change are being seen as long overdue reckonings.
As Arleanne Young reports, advocates say dismantling systemic racism will require the personal and political will to rethink everything.
After 21 years of teaching and talking about racism, Indira Prast is feeling a change in the air.
The outrage that has been expressed, that's hopeful.
She says weeks of protests in response to the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police are forcing policymakers to address systemic racism.
If we want to bring about the change, it's not just the police officer, it is the rules and regulations that they're guided by.
While there have been demands to revamp policing, advocates say change is needed at every institution.
People are dying because of anti-Indigenous and anti-Black racism, and I think that signifies that no, we're not doing enough. And sort of piecemeal approaches or one-day workshops are not going to fix that. It has to be embedded in interrogating our everyday decision-making systems.
Reddy says that means questioning every policy everywhere, asking who benefits and at whose expense. For BC's Black History Awareness Society, it starts in schools, acknowledging the legacy of Black slavery and colonialism. And for the province to recognize the UN International Decade for People of African Descent.
Once this is recognized, then we can proceed on creating policies or look at those policies that are racist.
The current system has privileged certain people. Leaders are often not representative, and Reddy says diverse voices get sidelined.
There's a lot of non-racialized folks in those positions of power deciding what the next step should be.
Advocates say those who are white need to examine their own privilege.
It really is the groundwork that we need to do as white folks, as leaders of organizations, before we can then start to make those other changes.
She's been calling on governments to start collecting race-based data.
And we need to see where people are being included, where people are not being included, and the impact of the racism that is systemically built within our institutions.
We do see the urgency. We are talking to people. We have heard that this is very much due. So all I can tell you right now is that this will be coming very, very soon.
But still, no exact timeline, and any major policy changes in government to address racism are going to take even longer.
Systemic racism didn't just happen overnight. It has been here for such a long time. For government to say, okay, we have funding, we're going to tackle racism, it's one step at a time.
A fight that some say can't wait any longer. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Yesterday's defacing of Gastown's Gassy Jack statue has put the history of the controversial figure under the microscope. Now the City of Vancouver is working with First Nations leaders to decide next steps. City of Vancouver now announcing it is reaching out to Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, matriarchs, and urban Indigenous leaders regarding the future of Gassy Jack. A petition to remove the statue is also gaining momentum with almost 4,000 signatures. Gassy Jack has been drawing criticism due to his treatment of Indigenous people and taking a 12-year-old child as his wife.
It's time to make your voice heard. CBC British Columbia is hosting a virtual town hall to discuss racism, Unmasking Racism, June 17th at 7 p.m. Streaming on Facebook, CBC Gem, and cbc.ca/BC.
A number of cities across Canada are relaxing the rules on public drinking during the pandemic. Vancouver considering the idea. Penticton has already done it in a pilot project.
As has the city of North Vancouver. As Tina Lovegreen explains, advocates say it's less risky than having people gather out indoors.
On a beautiful evening, you can catch plenty of people cracking open a cold one on Vancouver beaches. It's illegal, and police remind people of that, but it could soon change. The city is looking at tweaking bylaws to allow residents to drink at some public plazas.
It's kind of unfair to folks who live in small apartments and maybe don't have yards where they can have a drink outdoors with their friends. We know that enjoying the outdoors is the safest way to avoid COVID-19 rather than being indoors.
It's a plan also being considered by the board that oversees Vancouver's parks and beaches. Liquor laws around the country have eased to help the struggling hospitality industry. Quebec City allows drinking in large urban parks as long as it's with a meal. And Toronto promises to fast-track applications for patios to spill over into sidewalks and streets.
This is about really, treating adults like adults, allowing them to do some al fresco dining.
The City of North Vancouver just approved a drinking in public plan to help struggling restaurants, which can now sell alcohol with takeaway.
People are, for the most part, sensible. And if you travel around the world, everybody else is doing it, so why not us?
In BC's Okanagan, Penticton gave the green light for booze on some beaches.
It's nice to
not have to hide your beers, and we can enjoy the beach.
But health officials warn increasing availability also comes with risks.
Not all adults drink to excess, but a significant proportion, for example, of young adults in British Columbia report binge drinking. We know that our hospitalization rates for a whole host of alcohol-related issues are very, very high.
But so are fears of spreading COVID-19 if people socialize indoors instead of outside. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
A somber note tonight. Vancouver jazz musician Hugh Fraser has died at the age of 62. The two-time Juno Award winner was a trombonist, pianist, composer, and band leader, key to Vancouver's music scene. Fraser established the Vancouver Ensemble of Jazz Improvisation in the early 1980s and released 5 albums with the group over the ensuing 20 years. Fraser had been diagnosed with cancer in 2017, but did continue to perform as recently as last year.
First check of the forecast now. Meteorologist Brett Soderholm is here. Another beautiful day. Nice evening out there, Brett.
Yeah, there's certainly nothing to be complaining about right now. The sun is shining, it feels warm, and I'm so happy to say these conditions are going to be continuing right through tomorrow. And overall, it was a fairly quiet weather day here on the south coast, but elsewhere in the province, people were taking a little time looking at the skies. I want to show you what was going on in Dawson Creek, BC. This was earlier on this afternoon. This is, of course, a funnel cloud. It was spotted right around 3 o'clock and didn't last for very long. And now, while we usually associate funnel clouds with powerful thunderstorms, they're usually thought as precursors to tornadoes. This one here is likely a cold core funnel, which means it was a fairly benign one that can occasionally form behind a cold front. Now, they are fascinating to look at in any case, and I was so grateful to receive some of these pictures. And yeah, over here, though, on the south coast, if I can just show you on the satellite and radar imagery, there is nothing happening. Just a few little clouds here and there, but certainly those temperatures, as I mentioned, are dominant story. Right now, Vancouver sitting at about 20 degrees, farther inland, Abbotsford looking at 21 degrees. And this trend is going to be continuing throughout the next 24 hours or so. So the sunset not until about 9:20 p.m. tonight. It's going to be a great night to check that out if you can. Clear skies overnight. And then tomorrow we're going to see a decent amount of sunshine starting first thing in the morning, but then lasting all the way through much of the day. We may see a few high clouds here and there. But of course, this is my time to take the moment to let you know that because we are so close to the summer solstice, I want to outline for the Fraser Valley, Abbotsford in particular, the UV index tomorrow is very high. It is 10 on the scale of 10, and over here in Vancouver, it is going to be closer to 8. So please continue to be sun smart, and I'll have your full forecast when I come back.
Always thinking about being sun smart, Brett. Thank you. Well, 11,000 students graduated today in UBC's first ever virtual ceremony.
And they were congratulated by one of the university's more famous alumni.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous, and congratulations to the class of 2020.
The ceremony kicked off at 10 this morning for students at the Vancouver campus. A second event was held in the afternoon for Okanagan campus students. The virtual ceremony lasted 45 minutes and was live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, or Panopto, I don't even know what that is, a platform that is accessible from many countries. There you go.
I don't know if I know what it is either. Comedian Rick Mercer delivered the keynote address. The funny man received an honorary degree from UBC in 2010.
And a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs.
We know what the CBC Gem app is.
Bonobo, yes.
And Instagram, Facebook, we're on all of those things as well. The two of us, too. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
Expelled from Parliament, why NDP leader Jagmeet Singh was ordered out, and why he's refusing to apologize. That's next.
And thank you for continuing to watch us on our ad-free live stream. Now, the pandemic has restricted almost every aspect of life.
Some things are flourishing, and that includes video games. Gaming companies are reporting record sales and engagement time.
And as Bonnie Allen reports, some people who are stuck at home are getting more than entertainment. They're making connections.
Did you get them both?
Steve Vomaka and his 10-year-old son Harley don't live together, but they spend a lot of time together online playing video games.
That's how him and I connect.
Now more than ever, schools are closed and Vomaka lost his job due to the pandemic.
Like after the layoff happened, it's now like I wake up in the morning, I play some video games while I'm eating breakfast, do a quick workout, more video games, so it happens a lot.
Game companies are reporting record sales since the pandemic started. That's $10.5 billion worldwide in April alone.
As people have been forced indoors, usage has skyrocketed.
This global gaming network is reporting a 20 to 40% surge in traffic on its websites and YouTube channels.
Video games are the new social network. It's how you make friends. It's how you connect with your friends. Every night.
Competitive gaming, also known as esports, has been rapidly expanding in recent years. These in-person tournaments have come to a halt, but unlike traditional sports, esports can stage online tournaments and still flourish. That's what Travis Letwinick is banking on.
There's a lot of room for growth for esports.
The 24-year-old gamer is so good he won a scholarship 2 years ago to play varsity esports at a Pennsylvania university. But now he's trying to go pro.
I dropped out of university to pursue it, so I kind of got to give it my best.
Steve Vomaka's aspirations are more simple. He's taking classes to find a new job and, like many people, getting outside more. But still plans to carve out enough playing time to relax and connect with his son.
Yes, Harley, good job!
Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Regina.
Well, it isn't unusual for people in the Banff region of Alberta to spot wildlife, and bear sightings are pretty routine, except for this one. Yeah, this is a rare white-headed grizzly cub. Picture was captured near Banff National Park. The sighting has attracted a lot of interest from photographers and experts, as you would imagine. Parks Canada has asked the exact location not to be revealed. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Never. I feel like it's a stuffed animal. It's not real at all.
It's real, just don't know exactly where it is.
Very
Probably
cool.
Good, yeah.
All right, stick with us. We'll be back with more news coming up. Well, federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh got tossed from the House of Commons today. He called a Bloc Québécois MP a racist after the MP didn't support a new Democratic motion on systemic racism. Systemic racism in the RCMP, rather. As David Cochrane reports, Singh is sticking by what he said.
I also have a unanimous consent motion.
It started with a motion on systemic racism in the National Police Force.
As several Indigenous people have died at the hands of the RCMP in recent months.
But it went nowhere when the Bloc Québécois stopped it from going ahead.
No, okay, we don't have a unanimous consent, I'm afraid.
That isn't unusual. What followed is. An angry Jagmeet Singh called Bloc MP Alain Therrien racist. Therrien, sitting in the bottom right of your screen, let others speak for him as the Bloc demanded an apology, saying this is unacceptable, but no apology came. Instead, Singh doubled down.
Je l'appelle un raciste et je le crois.
Singh's refusal to apologize was a breach of parliamentary rules, so the Speaker kicked him out.
I order you withdrawn from the House for the remainder of this sitting day.
The Bloc Québécois has a very different explanation for all of this than the one being offered by Singh. The Bloc says a parliamentary committee has already been tasked with studying systemic racism in the RCMP, and that Singh's motion would be imposing a conclusion before that committee even starts its work.
In that context, someone who votes against that is a racist, yes.
That didn't satisfy Singh, who claims Tarayan made a dismissive gesture towards him.
And I looked back and I saw that MP not only say no, but make eye contact with me and just kind of brush his hand, dismiss it. And in that moment, I got angry. I'll be honest, I got angry. I saw the face of racism. That's what it looks like when someone dismisses the reality that people are going through. And so I had a moment of anger.
A moment of anger that got him expelled from the House. He will be allowed back tomorrow. David Cochran, CBC News, Ottawa.
Well, the legacy of racism is sometimes found in plain sight in the products we often consume. Aunt Jemima is a 131-year-old brand based on a racist stereotype. Jacqueline Hansen explains how it came to be and how it's now coming to an end.
Aunt Jemima pancakes.
Generations know Aunt Jemima's face, but perhaps not her backstory.
Aunt Jemima?
Singer Kirby Marie used TikTok to teach a history lesson.
Did you know the founder, Chris Rutt, a white man, got the name after attending a minstrel show? Think blackface.
Aunt Jemima.
This is a remake of the song that was supposedly the founder's inspiration, but the original was performed by men in blackface. And Aunt Jemima's face, that was based on a slave named Nancy Green.
Black Lives Matter, people, even over breakfast.
Cornell University's Rayshard Richardson called out the brand 5 years ago.
That image is very much linked to Black inferiority and nostalgic, reflects nostalgia about a time when Blacks were typically and predominantly domestics.
Quaker Oats says we recognize Aunt Jemima's origins are based on a racial stereotype. While work has been done over the years to update the brand in a manner intended to be appropriate and respectful, we realize those changes are not enough. While Richardson says that's a breakthrough, she's still troubled the company invested in the brand for decades.
I think people who maintain an investment in those stereotypes have to ask themselves, what are they thinking? I mean, what message do they want to send?
Some in advertising say blindness to cultural concerns comes from a lack of diversity in the industry.
I'm still, most of the time, the only Black person in the room.
This founder of a Toronto-based marketing agency says advertising won't change until hiring is more inclusive.
Start having diverse people, diverse voices at the decision-making tables. That's where the decisions are made, and that's where it really matters.
A change that could further transform the industry from the inside out. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
The former Atlanta police officer who fatally shot Rayshard Brooks at a Wendy's drive-thru has now been charged with 11 counts. That includes felony murder. As Stephen D'Souza tells us, the district attorney also revealed disturbing new details about Brooks's final moments and a warning: the video that exposes those details is difficult to watch.
I can just go home. I have my daughters there right.
For 41 minutes and 17 seconds, the district attorney says Rayshard Brooks was cooperative. Police had confronted him after the 27-year-old fell asleep in his car in a Wendy's drive-thru in Atlanta on Saturday.
Mr. Brooks, on the night of this incident, was calm. He was cordial.
The DA noted that after Brooks failed a breathalyzer, police failed to tell him he was under arrest, even as they cuffed him.
Put your hands behind your back.
What followed was a 2-minute struggle and chase, where Brooks grabbed a taser, turning to fire at officers, before getting shot twice in the back. The officer's lawyer says the killing was justified, but the DA notes the taser had already been fired twice, rendering it useless.
He did not pose an immediate threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or officers.
27-year-old Garrett Rolfe is facing 11 charges, including murder. That carries the possibility of life in prison or the death penalty. The DA also says for 2 minutes after Brooks was shot, Rolfe kicked him. A second officer, Devin Brosnan, stood on Brooks's shoulders. Neither followed procedure and offered medical aid.
I don't know what I would have done if I would have seen that for myself.
The new details were too much for Brooks's widow.
But I felt everything that he felt just by hearing what he went through. And it hurt. It hurt really bad.
The family's lawyer says the charges are a starting point, not the finish line.
Justice is not something that is going to be easy in this case.
In detailing the charges, the DA made a rare and surprising announcement that the other officer involved would testify against his partner. But that officer's lawyer tells CBC News that there's no agreement in place and that the charges he's facing are irrational. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Canada has lost its bid for a 2-year seat on the United Nations Security Council. Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne cast this country's ballot earlier today. Norway and Ireland beat out Canada for the 2 available seats for Western nations on the council. The Trudeau government has been campaigning for a spot on the UN's most powerful body for the past 4 years, but Canada hasn't had a seat at the Security Council in 2 decades.
After declaring victory against COVID-19 in March, officials in China are scrambling to contain a resurgence of the disease in Beijing. More than half the flights in and out of the Chinese capital have been canceled. Neighborhoods have been blocked off, schools are closed, and a mass testing campaign is underway. The outbreak has been linked to the city's largest produce meat market. It's now closed and under police guard. Officials say 137 people who worked there or went there have tested positive. Now the race is on to reach more than 200,000 people they may have come into contact with.
The Trudeau government will provide a fiscal update on July 8th, but the Prime Minister says it won't be a traditional economic update. Instead, it'll be a snapshot of where Canada is right now.
In a few weeks, we will gather all that together, along with a sense of where we are, comparisons to where we are compared to other countries, and some estimates on where we could be in the coming months. But this will not be an economic and fiscal update. It will be more of a snapshot or a portrait of where we are right now.
Trudeau has been under pressure from the opposition to provide a fiscal update, but he says the July announcement will be more focused on current economic conditions because the pandemic makes it difficult to provide the long-range financial forecast.
Mexico has stopped sending temporary foreign workers to Canada. The move comes as cases of COVID-19 continue to rise among migrant workers. As Jason Vio reports, 2 of them have died from the disease while working in southwestern Ontario.
Most of the temporary foreign workers have arrived at greenhouse operations across Ontario, but it's the farms officials say will be the most impacted by the Mexican ban. As many as 5,000 workers from Mexico are being held back for now.
They essentially would not be able to harvest their crops, and that would be very disruptive to the Canadian food supply chain.
Ontario's Ministry of Labour is currently investigating the 2 migrant workers who died in Essex County. A 24-year-old died earlier this month and a 31-year-old in May.
We're going to make sure that we're following up not just with our partners around the world, but with Canadians to ensure that we know what happened.
Trudeau spoke with Mexico's president, expressing his condolences and highlighting the important economic relationship. But until the Mexican government gets those answers, the temporary ban will remain in place.
We are looking that the conditions improved, that proper authorities find out what happened actually to that created this the spread of the virus that affected these 2 workers.
Since the pandemic began, provincial labor officials have done 88 field visits across the province. Most are in Essex County, and overall, they say they were random. There were also complaints about sanitation and concerns over the lack of physical distancing. Part of the problem now is the lack of testing of migrant workers. In Essex County, only about 700 of the more than 8,000 workers have been tested for COVID-19.
We just have to get everyone over and get them tested, as many as possible. And I understand the farmers are nervous, the workers are nervous.
And part of that nervousness is the fear of not being paid if migrant workers are forced to self-isolate for 2 weeks, something at least one farm operator in Leamington is vowing to take action on.
We at Highline have identified that as a possible disincentive to identify that they have symptoms or to be comfortable working or being off work because they're not making money. So we've pledged to all of our employees that we will make sure that the they're made whole financially.
And he's asking other operators to acknowledge the problem and address it head on to ensure they're doing everything they can to stop COVID-19 from continuing to rip through the agriculture sector. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Well, some good news tonight. If you like to camp, 31 national parks are opening and some campgrounds there next week, but there is a caveat. You can only head out if you have an existing reservation.
For a lot of people, no summer is complete without getting the tent packed, the kids in the car, and the time off to go camping. Now, because of the pandemic, many campgrounds had to close temporarily. But the good news is that as of Monday, Parks Canada will gradually start reopening some of their camping sites. No matter what you're planning this summer, whether it's camping or barbecues, keep following public health recommendations and keep doing your part to protect the people around you.
And for us in BC, the national parks that will be open include Kootenay, Yoho, Glacier, Mount Revelstoke, Gulf Islands, and Pacific Rim National Parks.
Opening up for business is part of Phase 3, but it's anything but normal. We talked to Destination BC about what tourism in BC will look like in the coming months. That's coming up.
25 minutes in front of 7 o'clock. Beautiful Wednesday evening here on the South Coast. Will the nice weather hold up for the weekend? Brett's going to tell us next.
It's time to make your voice heard. CBC British Columbia is hosting a virtual town hall to discuss racism, and we want to hear from you.
It's a global thing.
Just because I was an Asian.
Things like this should not exist.
But they need to hear our voices.
Send us your thoughts and stories by heading to cbc.ca/racism town hall. Unmasking Racism, June 17th at 7 p.m.
Tune in on CBC Radio 1, Facebook Live, and on GEM.
I guess, really, to answer your question, I think I'll die, personally. My own gut feeling is that I'm not going to make it 3 years. I guess that's as black and white as I can be.
His name is John, and several times this spring he had been sick. And 2 months ago, in his doctor's office, he found out why.
I came out and said, well, I guess it's the AIDS situation, isn't it? And his reaction was, yes, it looks like that. So that was pretty well it. But that evening, when I got back home, I had some real soul searching, and I guess I can honestly say there was some crying involved.
There's no cure for AIDS. It's deadly. People who've caught it have lived no longer than 3 years. Doctors don't know what causes it. They do know AIDS attacks the body's immune system. That means victims can catch any infection that happens to come along. Other people can fight off pneumonia, but it can kill an AIDS patient. So for John and other AIDS victims, it's just a case of coping day by day.
I would say I've been very lucky so far that I haven't really had any major catastrophes hit.
AIDS was first reported in New York City, where it has devastated the city's homosexual community. AIDS appears to be sexually transmitted, but it's now showing up in an unlikely group of other people. They include intravenous drug users, hemophiliacs, and people from Haiti. But what worries doctors most is this: the number of AIDS cases is doubling every 6 months.
I feel most of the time like we're sitting on a time bomb, waiting for it to explode.
Friends have died. The deaths have almost always been long, painful, and unbelievably heartbreaking.
A new group called AIDS Vancouver organized this forum in March. One of its aims, informing the public. For instance, that AIDS is not simply a homosexual problem. About 30% of AIDS patients come from other groups.
The problem is a public health problem. That if Canada and Vancouver follows what's happening in the States, it's everyone's problem, and no specific segment of society is unaffected.
AIDS Vancouver is also raising $60,000 to buy hospital equipment needed to screen possible victims. And it wants provincial government help, too.
I think it's a very touchy situation, and I don't know whether the government wants to jump into it full force.
But no one, least of all John, thinks there's going to be any quick solution, no magic wand.
It's almost pathetic, the lack of knowledge there is about this problem.
You and a lot of other people are going to die before this thing's sorted.
Darn right. Yeah, most definitely.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. 19 new cases of COVID-19 to report in BC today, but no new deaths. 2 new outbreaks, one in a long-term care home in Abbotsford and another at the Mission Memorial Hospital. Dr. Bonnie Henry calls this concerning and says it clearly demonstrates the virus remains in the community.
But I'm hopeful, based on the numbers we've seen over the past number of weeks, that we'll be in a position to move to phase 3 sometime next week.
And moving into phase 3 of BC's restart plan means easing travel restrictions within the province. More hotels and campgrounds are expected to open up. In fact, the Premier said today he's looking forward to making bookings himself.
Okay, so that optimism and a little bit of excitement from the Premier about moving on to the next phase. Also, likely really good news for BC communities reliant on tourism. Marcia Walden is the CEO of Destination BC, and she joins me now. Marcia, good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Anita. Wonderful to be with you tonight.
A lot of towns have been pretty hard hit by a lack of tourists. Will local tourism be enough to make up for the fact that we likely won't have Americans and possibly we'll have fewer people visiting from other provinces as well?
Well, we're hoping British Columbians will certainly give it a good try, but regrettably, international visitors do tend to spend more and stay a little longer than British Columbian visitors and travelers. So I think it's unlikely when we get to the end of the year that we would find British Columbians have completely made up for guests that we have from other parts of Canada or from international markets. Nonetheless, we do hope British Columbians take this opportunity this summer, once we're able to do so in phase 3, to take multiple vacations and enjoy their province.
Well, I'm certainly hearing of a lot of people who are planning to make multiple trips across the province. I know Destination BC is sort of marketing toward that. Tell me about that marketing strategy. What are you doing to encourage travel within the province?
Well, once we hear the good word from Dr. Henry, and hopefully we will hear that next week. We saw some encouraging words from our Premier today that make us believe that maybe it's just around the corner. And we, of course, are responsible for trying to ignite the interest and desire of travelers around the world in experiencing all that BC has to offer. Our marketing will be slowly dialed up over the course of the coming weeks as we move into phase 3, and we'll be showcasing every part of this glorious province and giving people good ideas for what to plan and book in the coming weeks and make sure they have a great summer with their families.
All that being said, some communities have said they don't actually want to open up. You know, they're worried people will bring the virus with them. What are some of the concerns you've heard, and how are you addressing those?
Well, I think most British Columbians are taking their guidance from our provincial health officer. And so I have every confidence that once Dr. Henry tells us that it's safe to travel, that British Columbians will also realize that there's no need to fear, that we need to maintain, of course, all of the precautionary measures that we've become so good at observing, and take those with us when we start to travel to keep our families and other communities safe from spreading the virus in any way. Some communities still are hesitant to welcome visitors, but I think that tide is turning, and it will start to turn even more quickly as time goes on.
Okay, we'll keep an eye out and see what happens in the coming weeks. Destination BC's Marcia Walden, thank you.
Thank you.
The weather update is brought to you by WorkSafe BC. Visit WorksafeBC.com for workplace health and safety resources, including COVID-19 prevention.
Meteorologist Brett Soderholm is back with us now. Certainly was a nice day today, but here we go. We're already looking towards the weekend.
I know what you're thinking.
Yeah. I know, and I can't believe that I'm in this position once again to be preparing you and everyone else for yet another rainy Saturday. I don't know how this is happening, but I mean, I do want to still stress we have a couple of nice days to go through before we get to that point. Let's take a closer look at the forecast across BC, because I want to start off by showing you how much of Vancouver Island, the south and central coast, are going to be remaining dry, not only for the remainder of this evening, but as we go throughout tomorrow. In fact, the only place in the province that's going to be seeing any noticeable rain is going to be on our northern coast, including Haida Gwaii. And you can see other places that got so much rain in the far northeast, like Dawson Creek and Fort Nelson, not seeing any of that in the near future, which is very good news. The only chance is down into the Kootenays as well, for just a slight risk for a shower or a thunder shower tomorrow on Thursday afternoon. But take a look at this. These temperatures all across BC for the next foreseeable future are going to be well above seasonal. We can see places in the Okanagan likely getting to that 30-degree mark tomorrow. And farther to the north, same thing. The heat is still going to be there for Dawson Creek and Fort Nelson. That has, of course, increased our fire danger rating ever so slightly, especially more for our central coastal regions, but we are still looking at a very low rating right now for places on the south coast. But yes, as the weekend looms, it's still a few days away, but we've been benefiting from this area of high pressure, and that will continue to be there until essentially Friday. But hot on its heels, this area of low pressure is going to be coming down right in time, as if predicted, for Saturday. So it is going to probably be a bit of a showery day there. That will, of course, add a little bit to our rainfall totals, but we are definitely above average as far as this month is concerned. That said, it is a little bit more interesting to look at how every day leading up to Saturday and every day after Saturday is still likely to be dry. Temperatures are going to be staying in and around that 20-degree mark for the next foreseeable future, and come Sunday, that is going to be the first full day of summer, and it'll be feeling like it as well.
Well, with a bit of sun, that'll be just fine. All right, thanks, Brett. Well, we have seen weeks of protests since the killing of U.S. man George Floyd and the impact his death has crossed borders. Here in Vancouver, Black Lives Matter demonstrations have filled city streets, all in an effort to shine light on the systemic and institutional racism faced by Black people.
And people of all races have joined that fight. So what does allyship look like, and why is it so important? We took that question to educators and advocates. Have a listen.
Allyship is any practice, any activity that delegitimizes, disinvests from, and brings an end to any harm that falls upon racialized people.
It's not something that you claim yourself. You cannot self-define as an ally. Allyship is a lifelong process of learning, unlearning, building relationships, building trust.
Well, allies do some of the most important work within their own communities.
We need to go back to our communities and talk to our leaders and our organizers in order to talk about anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism that exists in our communities.
Black people cannot be in all the places that the work needs to be done. So in maybe white families or in Chinese gatherings, if there's anti-Black racism going on in those places, it is up to the members of those communities who are allies, who do stand against anti-Black racism, who will be able to speak up.
Marginalized groups are not here to take down other marginalized groups. We have to show solidarity around similar causes, but that manifest themselves in different ways, obviously. Issues of communalism, casteism, classism, colorism, ableism, ageism. Our own work informs how we can be better allies with other groups that are feeling oppressed.
Living in a society in which there's racial equity has benefits for you as an individual. A very simple example is you understand more about racial differences, about racial inequality. You have less fear, or you have no fear, or you have more cross-cultural capital, your ability to engage in different types of conversations. You don't suffer from group threat. You don't suffer from white fragility. You know, there are so many examples of the benefits of allyship and racial equity.
CBC Vancouver is hosting a virtual town hall at 7 p.m. tonight. It's called Unmasking Racism.
CBC's Leanne Young and Angela Sterrett will help facilitate that conversation with various educators and advocates. The town hall begins online and on CBC Radio in less than 15 minutes. Well, things are about to change around here at CBC Vancouver. We're going to tell you who's leaving and why. The big reveal next. Well, a very sexually active tortoise in the Galapagos and his partners may have saved their entire species. Biologists say 100-year-old Diego came to the rescue by mating so much he brought his kind back from the brink of extinction. Before Diego was put on loan from the San Diego Zoo, the island of Espanola was down to just 14 Galapagos tortoises. Now, thanks to Diego and his partner's efforts, the island has been repopulated, wait for it, with more than 2,000 tortoises.
Wow. The Galapagos National Park Service estimates that Diego accounts for about 40% of that population. Diego is now able to retire after a career as perhaps the most eligible shell-dwelling bachelor of all time.
Oh,
that'll be a fun Father's Day.
Yeah, no kidding. What happened to slow and steady wins the race?
He didn't look that fast anyway.
Dan Burrett joins us now because, well, Anita has some news tonight.
Yes, I am going on mat leave for the next 6 months, so tonight is my last show. A little bittersweet.
We're going to miss you.
Yeah.
And don't you worry, we have a highlight of some of your more creative work in the studio.
I think that does make me worry.
Yes, indeed. From the air and on the ground. Take a look.
That was the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life. Where's my ring?
Whoa.
Thank you, Dan.
Anita.
I don't hear anything. Stay down. Oh, hold on. Where's my mic? Oh no, Mike's here. I was like, Mike, can you just shut up? Just shut up.
The Wrath of Bath.
So rude. You're too tall.
I am not.
A sliver down.
No,
a sliver.
I'm not going. Thank you.
Then I'm going up.
No, that looks stupid.
No, it doesn't. You know,
Point
I could leave, right?
Oh, geez, look at you getting all stroppy. I'll just leave.
Nothing too embarrassing there.
Well, you said jumping out of the plane was the most exciting thing you've done, but I think that adventure is just about on you with the impending arrival.
I'm sure I'm in for a lot of chaos, but a lot of also, really nice, good times. You guys have all given me your advice. Dan, obviously dishing out the most advice. So.
Absolutely,
As
a self-proclaimed best uncle ever. Yep. Just put them in a room somewhere. I know doors locked from the outside. It's great. We're going to miss you. Have fun and love and happiness to you and to your entire family.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, Unmasking Racism. Angela Starrett and Leanne Young are hosting a CBC Vancouver virtual town hall on racism. They're going to be joined by a diverse panel of experts.
You can watch on cbc.ca/BC, CBC Gem, CBC Vancouver on Facebook, and listen on CBC Radio 1, Unmasking Racism. That's happening tonight from 7 until 8:30.
And Mr. Burrett will be here at 11, right after the National. Thanks for watching, and Anita, congratulations once again.
See you in half a year. Good night.